So the last group presenting in block 1 is Kalamazoo, Michigan. This is a mission 6 flight experiment, so we've just moved on to mission 6 and 10th grade.
Hello, we are a team from Kalamazoo, Michigan, mission 6, presenting our results. When we conducted and designed this experiment, we were in 8th grade at St. Monica. Last year, we were lucky enough to be selected to have our experiment conducted on the ISS, and we are fortunate to be here with you all presenting our results. With me today are myself, Delaney Hewitt, Natalie Moyer, Mackenzie Ortlieb, and Grace Brennan. For our experiment, we tested microgravity's effects on Branchinecta Anostracca, aka dry lake fairy shrimp. Our materials were 20 fairy shrimp eggs, 7 milliliters of distilled water, 1 milliliter of fixative, and 1 milligram of the shrimp food yeast solution. The procedure consisted of exposing the shrimp eggs and food to water for a week, allowing the Branchinecta Anostracca to grow and reproduce. At the end of the week, fixative was released to end the experiment. We received our experiment back, and our results were inconclusive. My teammates will elaborate more on this point. Our SSEP journey helped us to understand more advanced scientific study by coming up with a proposal and presenting our experimental outline. It also gave us the opportunity to travel to Washington, D.C. and Chincoteague Island, as well as experience a rocket explosion, watch our experiment go to space, and analyze the data and results.
Our results were, like Delaney said, inconclusive. There were some errors in the designing of our experiment, and the main error basically all goes back to our shrimp. There was only one supplier of the shrimp eggs that we wanted to use, and the one supplier that there is no longer carries the eggs because they had issues with hatching. The supplier gave us no information clarifying how the shrimp were packaged, and we later found out that the eggs were packaged with sand, and the freeze-dried eggs and the sand look exactly alike. So we emailed our supplier to find out why they stopped carrying the shrimp eggs, and it took literally like 2 months to get a response. And when they did respond, they kind of beat around the bush and didn't really give us straightforward answers, so that kind of caused a lot of frustration.
So this was the email that we received from the supplier, and basically, as you can see, they're saying that we were having problems hatching the eggs, and so that's why we believe that we got one of the batch with the faulty eggs. And it said that if the shrimp eggs were good from last year's harvest, then they would post them online, and they were never posted, so we assumed that they weren't good from the harvest. And they said that they would give us the eggs, but they weren't guaranteed to hatch, which means that they could have given us a batch of eggs that were not guaranteed to hatch. We had a few limitations while we were doing our experiment, and one was that we didn't really have a, quote, perfect environment for hatching our shrimp. It said that sunlight was ideal for hatching the shrimp, but it wasn't necessary, so we didn't have sunlight in the FMU tube up in space. We also used a yeast food solution, which leaked through the clamps a bit, and some molding started to occur. There were many limitations that were also beyond our control, like Mackenzie mentioned. So we attempted doing our experiment in ideal or perfect conditions, and the shrimp still didn't grow. We tried using bigger constraints, putting shrimp in the right amount of sunlight, not using the yeast food solution, and not shaking the shrimp container, and the shrimp still did not hatch.
What we would do differently. Well, we would have gotten a more reliable supplier that would actually answer our emails and kind of communicate with us better. And we would have kind of clarified the packaging information before we did our experiment, because that kind of led to a lot of problems.
We would have made sure the shrimp we chose could grow in the conditions of the FME tube allowed. The FME tube was one of our limitations because of the constraints of the tube and the lack of light, which was not needed, but it is preferable, as Natalie said. If these shrimp couldn't have hatched in these conditions, we would have chosen a better suited shrimp for our experiment. We would have chosen a better suited shrimp such as brine shrimp, a more well-known shrimp that is easier to get a hold of. In conclusion, we may not have gotten the results we wanted, but we look at this experiment as trial and error. And this science is how we learned how science works, and not everything goes the way we've planned, but we want to say we are so blessed to have gotten to speak here and letting us get this opportunity to present our experiment and grow as scientists. We would like to say a special thank you to the Catholic Schools of Greater Kalamazoo, the SSEP Community Program Coordinates, Mrs. Becky Wrights, Principal of St. Monica School, Mrs. Katie Gilbert, Advancement Director of Space and Science in the National Center for the Advancement of Space and Science, and Mrs. Susie Vanderbeek and Mrs. Diane Page. And a special thank you to our parents for taking us on all these trips. Thank you.
Questions for the Kalamazoo team?
I'm Kayla from Pennsylvania, and you said that they had faulty shrimp eggs. Was that just the Earth team, or the one that went up in space were all faulty?
Well, the place where we got the shrimp, the hatchery, all their eggs are faulty. So
We use the same shrimp that we sent up, so like this from the same package as on Earth with our trial.
So they were all faulty?
Yeah, that's what we
Okay.
believe. But
Thank you.
I'm Alex from New York. So did you have any hypothesis, anything that you thought the results would have been?
We did think that the shrimp would not grow because they don't have much muscle mass, which is what we were measuring. And so it would be hard for them to even develop it if astronauts lose muscle mass in space. So we kind of figured they would be misshapen or dead. So.
All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Sean Brooks from Toronto. I just had a question. Could you elaborate on the space leakage problem you had with the lab?
So we had in one area or one clamp in the FME tube, we had like a yeast food solution, and we looked and we thought maybe like some shrimp were going in our FME tube on Earth, but we looked and it turned out that like the yeast food solution had leaked into the water, and that had caused some molding to occur in the area with the like where the shrimp eggs were supposed to hatch.
I'm Karina from Florida. How did you get the idea to use shrimp for your project?
Well, we originally, when we started designing experiments, we saw that like aquatics were an option, and so we were really interested, and we kind of just searched what could fit and what could possibly grow in the environment, and we picked our shrimp from there.
I'm Dylan from New York, and if the experiment worked, would it be beneficial for life on ISS?
It could possibly be, because it would give us a better understanding of how muscle mass development works in space, but we didn't really come up with a solution to help the problem. We just were trying to better understand it.
Thank you.
Okay, let's thank the Kalamazoo, Michigan team.